Right, hello everybody. I've got a deeply unenviable task now of following what I thought was a very powerful speech. Luckily I'm talking about a totally different topic, so if we start from that point of view, everybody maybe give me a benefit of the doubt. So I'm Rhodri, I head up policy at Charities Aid Foundation, but the more relevant thing in a way that I do there is I run a thing called Giving Thought, which is essentially kind of our in-house think tank. So it's just a bit of space we've carved out to think about core issues affecting charities and civil society here and around the world, but from a slightly bigger picture and longer term perspective. And one of the things I've been doing for the last 5 years is thinking about the impact of kind of emerging and disruptive technology on charities. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, and one way in which I think it's particularly relevant to the sorts of organisations that are in the room today. So my starting point is I don't think technology is something that we can see as happening over there or kind of a specific issue that we don't need to pay attention to anymore. I think we're all aware that technology is affecting our lives in terms of the way we work, the way we interact, the entertainment that we have, the way we communicate. And it's affecting all of us and society more widely. And the pace of change is not just fast, it's rapidly accelerating. So I think it's impossible for us to put our heads in the sand any longer. And I think technology is going to affect civil society and organisations within it in three broad ways. So the first is that there are some amazing opportunities to use technology for good, to understand the problems we're trying to address more effectively and to find new interventions that could potentially produce great outcomes. The second is that even if you don't particularly see the value in that, the impact on the wider operating environment is going to be such that it's going to affect the organisations that we all work for in lots of different ways, and we need to understand that. And the third is that even if you're not particularly bothered about that, technology is going to have a profound impact on the sorts of people and communities that we're all trying to serve. And if we don't understand the way in which technology is changing the nature of those challenges, we might fail to be relevant in a few years' time. And what I want to specifically focus in on is the way in which technology is affecting our ability to organise, and what I see as a really interesting shift to a very old model of organisation, which is less about hierarchies and more about flat structures and networks. So in the commercial sphere at the moment, it's well known that a lot of the biggest companies in the world are platforms, not centralised organisations anymore. So it's an oft-repeated fact that Uber, for instance, is the largest transport company in the world, doesn't own any cars. Airbnb is the largest property company in the world, doesn't own any cars. And actually this shift from feeling like you have to own things and act as the gatekeeper of resources towards acting as a platform where you put people in touch with the services and assets that they need is quite profound. Obviously you can throw up some challenges about whether Uber and Airbnb truly are decentralised, but let's park that for a moment. And the question is, we're seeing this happening in the social sphere as well. So there are new platforms that enable people to give directly to people in the developing world and within their own communities, but also networked social movements. So if you think about a lot of the big social change movements of the last few years, like Black Lives Matter, Me Too, the response to the school shootings in the US, the response to Grenfell, none of those were led by traditional centralised civil society organisations. They were much looser networks of people coming together organically and trying to work out how best to address their problems. And my question is, should we in the more traditional bits of civil society be excited by this change or feel challenged by it? I think network models could bring huge positives in terms of rebalancing power, addressing some of the issues that perhaps have been highlighted around trust in the sector, giving people more of a sense of agency. But I do also think there are questions in terms of what this means for people in traditional civil society organisations. If you're excited by the potential of network models, how do you engage with them without stifling them? There's been some interesting stuff around the way in which the Ford Foundation in the US has tried to support Black Lives Matter, and it's come in for a lot of criticism in terms of the way it's tried to kind of reshape the focus of that organisation. And are we genuinely happy giving away power? It's very easy to say we like to give away power, but actually when push comes to shove, are we? And I think also we need to be aware that even if network models bring some amazing potential and opportunities, they will raise new challenges. How do you make decisions within the horizontal structure where there are no obvious points at which decision-making can be centralised? Where's the accountability for who follows through on those decisions and what happens if it goes wrong? How do you ensure that you have long-term voice and influence if it's difficult to identify the leaders within that? Or even for authorities to decide for themselves who are the leaders of the movement and choose the ones that they find easiest to deal with? What about the hidden hierarchies that inevitably emerge within flat structures? What about the missing infrastructure for the long term that might be left behind if these things come to scale much faster than has ever been possible before? And what about the dependence on individual personalities and relationships rather than organisational forms that is inevitable if you start talking about decentralised approaches? So my question really is, should traditional organisations be highlighting some of these flaws and actually saying we should put the brakes perhaps on this, this excitement around networked social movements, or should they be supporting and nurturing these movements at a local area and nationally? And I think one thing is for certain, the space for doing social good in the future, as plenty of people have highlighted, is going to be more crowded. Businesses are coming in and trying to co-opt the idea of doing social good, but equally there are all these new forms of organisation available to people and communities to do things at scale in a way they were previously unable to. And the question really is, when it comes to these networks, do charities and civil society organisations embrace the potential of them, or do they see their role as resisting some of the challenges that they bring? And I think local organisations are uniquely well placed here, because these issues that everybody in the digital space is suddenly discovering about accountability and decision making and the problems of hidden hierarchies, they're not new. And actually, people organising within civil society have been dealing with them for hundreds of years. So actually, I think organisations like yours have something genuinely really interesting and insightful to tell people who are starting to engage with this idea of digital organisation. So that's my challenge. Thank you.